Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 13-game college football slate that starts at 12 noon Eastern Time. The slate also has the last game start at 4 o'clock, so keep that in mind here. We only have a couple games that have big spreads, which are the Kansas State game where they're favored by 15.5 points, and Michigan that's favored by 37.5. So keep that in mind. All the other games are within 10 points. Kentucky is favored over EKU too, but the spread is not out on that. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get into the slate. We have some really good quarterback options today, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to start here at the quarterback position with Dart from Ole Miss. Now, he started the season very good with his first game against Mercer. Now, he's got a good matchup here, and Tulane should be a team that he should be able to dominate again. He had 334 yards in his first game, and I don't suspect that he's going to have too much of an issue doing something similar again, as Mississippi is favored to score a lot of points in this one. This game should be pretty scoring happy, as it's the best on the slate with 66.5 points between the two teams. And I expect Ole Miss to win that game. So I do think this is a good quarterback here. He's also very expensive at $9,700, but he's definitely viable here. We'll look at Sanders for Colorado as well. Now, obviously, he dominated his first game for Colorado, and they have another decent matchup here against Nebraska. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game as well. It's one of the higher-scoring games on the slate, and Colorado is also favored to win this game by 3 points. I do think he's going to have a lot of throws to try to get that in, so he's definitely a good option on the slate. And then we'll look at Armstrong for NC State. Now, he does have a tough game here against Notre Dame. The reason I'm including him is because he also has a lot of rushing yard opportunity in this game. He had a really good first game here where he rushed for 96 yards on 20 attempts almost, and he also had a couple touchdowns, so he definitely draws some good potential here from that perspective. Now, that's why he's expensive, so he does have a tough matchup here against Notre Dame, but I do suspect that NC State will get some points on this in this game. Then we'll look at J.J. McCarthy for Michigan. Now, in his first game, he had a really solid outcome with 26 for 30 from the field. I expect him to have a similar upside in this game, as Michigan should dominate this game. I do think he probably won't play too deep in the game because they'll get ahead for a while, but he is definitely a good play on the slate, as he has good touchdown potential and also just total throws potential here. Then we'll look at Hartman for Notre Dame. Now, he's a little bit cheaper here at $8,600. He's played 2 games this season, so do keep that in mind. But he's managed to have 6 touchdowns in those 2 games, and he's got a nice matchup here against NC State. I do suspect that he's going to have some opportunities to throw some touchdowns in this one as well, as it should be a pretty high-scoring game, and so he's a viable option. But he's kind of a secondary option to the other guys I've mentioned so far. And then we're going to look at Wells for Virginia Tech. Now, Virginia Tech is favored to win this game by 3 points, but he's got a lot of opportunity to get a lot of throws. He should be one of the quarterbacks that gets more throws than most other teams when it comes to the cheaper options, so that's why I've got him included here. I do think the Kentucky quarterback is also in play a little bit, but he's a little bit risky today. But Wells looks really solid today from this perspective, and he had a good start to the season. And then finally, we're going to look at Marshall's quarterback, and that's Fancher for them. Let's see here. Now, the risk here is that game is not projected to be a very high-scoring game. It's one of the lower ones on the slate, but he's a very good, capable quarterback that should get a lot of opportunity to throw the ball. And he had a really good first game, and so I think he's going to have some good opportunity here. The risk here is not getting enough touchdowns, but he should be able to get a decent chunk of yards, as his opponent ECU really has nothing to do to stop him, and I think that Marshall's quarterback will throw the ball a lot. So he's a good cheap option at $6,300. Maybe in the running backs here, we're going to start with Ray Davis from UK. Now, he had a really good first outing with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Don't let that deceive you, the matchup there. He's got another great matchup here against a team that won't have any ability to stop him. He should have some good opportunity in the first half, especially to score a touchdown or two. Moving into Estime for Notre Dame, he's going to have some interesting opportunity to get some runs here. He should get around 15 attempts, hopefully, and if he can do that, he should have some opportunity for a touchdown. He's also got a really good opportunity here because NC State is really not very good against the run, so that should give him some utility here. Then we're going to look at Johnson um, for or sorry, Edwards from Colorado. Now the issue with him is that he's probably going to get more opportunity through the air, but he's high risk, high reward. His price is actually pretty fair, but isn't going to get a ton of rushing attempts because they do split the ball there. But he's got some targets in the air, which are going to give him some opportunity here, and he did really well in his first game, where he had 3 touchdown catches and 5 total receptions. He's one of the few running backs that are going to have a lot of opportunity to get some yards to the air, though, and so he's a great option from that perspective. Then we're going to look at a guy that's $5,800 and Keon Johnson for Iowa. I really do kind of like Iowa in this game, and he had a really good first game where he had 20 rushes almost, and he does have touchdown potential in this game. It's going to be a tight game, but I do think he's got some viability from the rushing perspective, as Iowa State is probably going to struggle in this game against him. And then we're going to look at, excuse me, Ali for Marshall. Now he's a little bit higher risk, higher reward, but he's nice and cheap here. He's going to have plenty of rushing attempts to have an opportunity to have a good game here. The only real risk here is that this game gets out of hand and he doesn't have as many attempts, but I do think he'll have some capability here. He also has some opportunity to get some reception uh, yards as well. Even though he only had 1 reception in his first game, he did get a couple targets, so he is capable there. And he's got some good opportunity because Marshall should have a good game. Then we're going to look at Richardson for Baylor. Now he's high risk, high reward here, but he had a first game where he had 16 attempts. I think he'll get similar to that in this one, and he's got some opportunity for some targets as well through the air. He's also nice and cheap, which give him some utility, though he is a co-starter, so do keep that in mind. So he does have an interesting matchup here. Utah is definitely better against the run. Was better against the run last week than this. Utah has a really good opportunity against. Sorry, sorry, I can't say. He's got a tough matchup here. That's what I'm trying to say for against Utah. But he is capable of a decent game, especially if he can get some yards to the air and stuff like that. So he is high risk, high reward at his price point, but it's a good matchup for him. Maybe the wide receivers, we have quite a few different options here, and so I'm going to go ahead and start with Harris for Mississippi. Now, he had a great first week where he had 6 receptions for 133 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't necessarily think he's going to do the same as that, but he's got a good matchup as his opponent Tulane has some difficulty through the air, and if you go with the Ole Miss quarterback, it's definitely not bad to look at him as a decent option to run in the wide receiver spot if you can afford them. Then we'll look at Horn and Weaver for Colorado both. They both have some capabilities here. I don't necessarily think that Colorado is going to have as many touchdowns this week as they did last week, but I do think they both have some viability, and they both have 100-yard potential. Uh, Stewart for Texas A&M is also in play. He had some nice upside last week against against his first opponent in New Mexico, but he's got another good matchup here. Though they are pretty good against their, pass. They're still pretty rough, and I think Texas A&M has some nice upside on the slate. And he's one of the cheaper. He's one of the more expensive guys that I like because he has touchdown and target potential. Then we'll look at Travis Hunter, who plays both ways for Colorado. Now that does limit his upside a little bit because he gets so many snaps, but he had a lot of receptions last week, and I expect him to have a potential for that again this week. He's also got a great matchup here from wide receiving. I think Colorado is a great team to potentially stack if you can figure out how to do it. Though at least 1 or 2 of the guys from Colorado is probably worth taking a look at. Then we'll look at Jennings for Virginia Tech. Now he had a really good week with 5 receptions and 2 touchdowns in his first week. He's got a good matchup here against Purdue, who's been really bad against the rush in their first game, through the pass in the first game. He's a little bit expensive today, but if you go with if you like some Virginia Tech today, which I do, then he's definitely somebody that's worth taking a look. They've got a couple guys that I like on this slate as well. Then we're going to look at $6,400 Thomas for Notre Dame. Now he does have a tough matchup here against NC State, but I do like Notre Dame's quarterback, so if you go with him, then you can definitely consider going with a couple of wide receivers here. He's a little bit expensive. He's the most expensive one, but he's definitely capable of a good game. He's going to get plenty of targets, as he'll have 4 or 5 each game, and he has some nice upside as a result. Then we're going to look at Watkins for Mississippi. Now, I really like Mississippi, as I've told you. and especially the quarterback. And their matchup here against Tulane is good for their wide receivers. He's going to get plenty of targets here, and he's got some really good potential. And if he can score some touchdowns, that would also bolster uh, his fantasy point production. He's also nice and cheap, which give him some upside here for Ole Miss. Then we'll look at Thomas for Texas A&M. Now he's at $6,100. He's a little bit cheaper here. He does have some good potential for some targets, though I don't think he's going to get 3 touchdowns again. But getting 1 touchdown and at least 70 yards would definitely give him a boost here. And he's got a pretty good matchup here to do it against Miami. Though I do think this game is going to be tight, and so he'll have to make some plays to really pay off for this team. But he's probably one of 2 guys on Texas A&M in the outfield in the wide receiver core that I like quite a bit. Then we'll look at Garcia um, Kansas State. Excuse me. He had 5 receptions in his first game. I don't necessarily think he's going to get over 100 yards again, but he's got a good matchup here against a team that's going to have some tough difficulty here against the pass. Even though they did pretty good in their first game, they're still going to give up some scores here. And Kansas State is a team that I do think is viable to take a look at some players from. He also gets enough targets that he's worth that look. Moving to Barry and Brown uh, from Kentucky. Now he is the top wide receiver for Kentucky, though he only had a few yards in his first game. He is a big target for them, and he definitely has some touchdown potential in this game, which should theoretically be easier than the first game. And he has some really good potential here. He also had a return touchdown last week, which gave him a little bit of a boost. But I do think they're going to spread the ball around, and if you go with any Kentucky player, he's one along with Darren Key, along with Key, excuse me, that has some upside for Kentucky, but he's not too expensive either. And then we'll look at Wilson for Michigan. Now he had a pretty solid game with 6 receptions and 3 touchdowns. I don't expect 3 touchdowns again, but he does have a good matchup here against UNLV, and I like his potential to get some more catches. Hopefully, he can eclipse 100 yards at least and maybe a touchdown, and that gives him a great opportunity, especially at this nice reduced price point. Then we'll look at Lane um, for Virginia Tech. He's another guy from Virginia Tech I like okay today. He had 4 receptions in his first game and a touchdown. He's definitely capable of that again. He's got a great matchup here, and Virginia Tech is a team that should need to score a couple through the air to pay off here. Then we'll look at Robinson for Kentucky. Now, he's a guy that played really well last season, and he's going to take some time probably this year to get used to the new quarterback, but he has some nice potential for a touchdown today, and I think EKU is going to have a difficulty stopping all 3 of the main wide receivers for Kentucky. But the guy that did the best last week is Key for Kentucky, and he has some really good potential today as well as he has become kind of the favorite for their quarterback at this point. I expect him to continue the decent production. He has some really good opportunity here to have a good game, and he has touchdown potential. If he can score over 100 yards this week, that would definitely boost his fantasy output. He's also nice and cheap. In fact, all 3 Kentucky wide receivers are pretty cheap for the matchup that they're in. Then we'll look at Greathouse for Notre Dame. Now he's dirt cheap here. He's kind of a boom or bust play because he has some. He's only going to get a few targets, but if he can score some touchdowns, it seems like in his first couple games he managed those receptions in the red zone. So he looks like an interesting play today, but he's high risk, high reward at his price. Then I have a few tight ends for you to consider as well. They're also obviously a little bit cheaper and have they need to be on teams where there's more check down potential. One of them is Ben Sinnott for Kansas State. He has some good metrics here as he has good reception opportunity because he'll have a decent amount of targets in this game, regardless if the game gets out of hand for either team. I think he's going to have some nice utility though here. Um, Oopsie. And then we'll look at Evans for Notre Dame. Now he has some up and down, but he's nice and cheap here. He's going to have several targets in this one, especially in a game that should be a little bit tighter and high scoring. He should have some potential to have a big game here, and I like his upside because if they go after the quarterback in this one, he'll have to get some opportunities. Loveland for um, Michigan also in play here. He looks like an interesting play because he has some decent amount of targets, and he didn't miss any last week, and he's going to have some more opportunity this one because this should be a little bit tighter game. Granted, it really shouldn't be. Michigan's going to dominate this game, but he should have he should have plenty of opportunities, kind of like he did last week, to have a decent amount of targets and hopefully a touchdown. If he can pull off a touchdown, he'll pay off greatly, especially at this nice minimum price. Then Dabney for, excuse me, for Baylor. He's also in play today. He had a lot of reception in his first week, and I look for Baylor to have another game where they're going to try to get him the ball a lot. And Utah has going to have a tough time stopping him, and he's going to have a lot of fantasy point upside. I don't know if he'll get 2 touchdowns, but this dirt cheap price, he's too cheap to ignore based on his potential here. Lackey for Iowa also in play as he had 7 receptions and 9 targets last week against Utah State. He's got a good, interesting matchup here against Iowa State, where he should have some opportunity, and this should be a tight game. He might be able to get some. He might be able to steal a touchdown this week as well. And then last but not least, Cade Conley from Marshall. This is a lower scoring game, but he was targeted quite a bit in his first game, and he looks like he's a pretty good opportunity on the slate with a good uh, potential to lead the team in yards. I like his upside here and has good potential in this one. So he's also dirt cheap and somebody to consider. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.